Statistical significance versus meaningful difference. How about also statistical significance versus statistical trend? Because a lot of the misinformation about foods and nutrition online are based in statistical trends, meaning a difference that doesn't quite reach statistical significance. Statistical significance means that there is a very small chance that any difference measured is an accident. It's due to chance. Let's say as an example, you want to know if there is a statistically significant difference in heights between males and females. In a scientific study, you would go about measuring that by creating a sample. Take 100 males, 100 females, you measure their height and you find the average. In a simple comparison like this, you would then compare the averages using something called a t-test, which gives you the likelihood that that difference in averages is really reflective of the whole population and not just to the luck of the draw. Because you could end up with a statistical sample where all of your males are 5 foot to 5'4", and your females are 5'6" to 6 feet tall. In this case, you would end up with average heights that are not actually reflective of the total population. And the conclusion you would draw based on that data is that females are taller than males on average. So the t-test looks at the variability in your sample, the standard deviation, and the differences in average to determine what's the likelihood that that sample is really representative of the whole population, or you have some weird luck of the draw thing showing a difference that isn't there. Usually, we call something statistically significant when there's less than a 5% chance that the difference is due to something weird with the sample. Now, there's still a 5% chance that that difference is not a real difference, which is why we never put too much weight into any one study, and we want to look at the whole field of research, all of the different studies that look to answer that question, which is why systematic reviews and meta-analyses are so powerful. Now, we call something a statistical trend if there's between a 5 and a 10% chance that that difference is due to some kind of sample weirdness. And we say, look, there's too high of a likelihood that this could be due to some kind of random chance of the sample for us to put a lot of stock into this one comparison. So we won't draw any firm conclusions, and we will make note to repeat this experiment with a larger sample size next time. A meaningful difference is a high enough magnitude of effect that it's worth taking action on, but also somewhat dependent on how hard and disruptive that action is. So let's say something reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease by 10%. It's statistically significant, huge body of scientific literature, we have systematic reviews and meta-analyses. We know this is the magnitude of effect. Well, given that heart disease is the #1 cause of morbidity and mortality in the USA, a 10% reduction in that is a big deal. That would make a big impact to public health. What if it's a 10% reduction in the duration of a mild cold? Instead of 3 days long, it's 2.7 days long. Is that a meaningful difference? Okay, let's go back to the cardiovascular disease example. What if to get that 10% reduction in cardiovascular disease, it required something really hard? Everybody eating a really disgusting food that also happens to be extremely expensive. So the action part of the equation is hard. We're likely to have very low compliance. So only really, in the end, a small fraction of the people at risk for cardiovascular disease are going to do this hard thing. Will that make a meaningful difference? Probably not. And there's always part of the meaningful difference equation that's individual. Let's say breast cancer runs in your family, you have the genes. Doing something that reduces your risk of breast cancer by 10% is going to be personally very meaningful to you. But if there's no cancer in your family and you don't have the genes, a 10% reduction in breast cancer risk, especially if that thing is really hard, may not be a priority for you. Now let's bring this all back to nutrition and diet misinformation online. A lot of the fear-mongering online is presenting a statistical trend as a meaningful difference. And sometimes it's quoting data that doesn't even rise to the level of statistical trend as a meaningful difference. And of course, sometimes it's just outright lies.